You're listening to Beyond Wellness Radio, bringing you the cutting edge in health, nutrition, and sports performance. Stay up to date and listen anywhere, anytime on your computer, tablet, or smartphone by subscribing on iTunes. Catch your hosts, Dr. Justin Marchegiani and Barris Harvey, as they answer your burning health questions, as well as interviews from world-renowned guest experts. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Beyond Wellness Radio. We have a great podcast for you today. But first, make sure you go to beyondwellnessradio.com. There you can sign up to the newsletter. By signing up to the newsletter, you'll be able to get access to all of our interviews and all of our podcasts that we create for you way in advance, about 5 episodes now. So definitely do that. Also, we would really appreciate it if you guys gave us a review on iTunes. Going to Beyond Wellness Radio and clicking on the review allows us to spread our message more wide. So that's awesome. Make sure you guys also get the chance to go to justinhealth.com. That can also be found at beyondwellnessradio.com. By doing that, you can see all of the awesome content that Dr. Justin has provided. He talks a lot about female hormones, infections, and also you have the availability, to work with him. He works with clients around the country, so you can schedule a free 15-minute consultation with him. He also has a free video series, so go ahead and sign up to the newsletter there. Also, make sure you go to reallyhealthynow.com, which is my site, and you can sign up to the newsletter there to be ready to receive my ebook. So with all that being said, how's it going today, Dr. Justin?
It's going great, Barris. I actually just got back from the Bulletproof Conference last week where I was treating patients, gave a little talk action, and was able to kind of play around with a lot of different biohacking tools. And I'm also experimenting with Unfair Advantage. It's a new CoQ10 PQQ compound for cognitive performance and mitochondrial function.
Oh yeah, how's that going?
It's pretty good. I mean, I'm just doing a little bit more research on PQQ and its effects on cognitive enhancement, on mitochondria activation, and just trying to sample it out and see how we do, see how my focus is and my mental mindset in general.
Yeah. So is that one with also has CoQ10 in there as well?
Yeah, it's got about I think 20 milligrams of CoQ10, 10 milligrams of PQQ. And I'm doing about 2 ampules of that a day, so about 40 and 20. And I just giving it a try, seeing how I do. I like it. I like a lot of Bulletproof's products, so it's good stuff. And also, I'm shocking myself right now as we speak. I'm using one of the PRS devices from ArtWave to help kind of drive some blood flow and help reduce some inflammation from an old wrist injury where I fell and did some cartilage damage. So just trying to biohack my way back to health.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny, as you mentioned that I am also having some electric stimulation right now. I have the Mark Pro device on my back. So I'm a little sore on the back, so just getting the blood flowing, helping as well with the inflammation. And yeah, I mean, like football is not the healthiest activity, but yeah, man, it is. So if you have the ability to get your hands on any of these technologies to help with recovery, that's like most of it right there.
It's huge. What I mean? Yeah, it's huge. I mean, obviously the diet and the lifestyle and the sleep, there's no laser or electrifying device that's going to ever replace that. But once you get that in place, then it's like, all right, now what's the next thing you can do? So I think it's safe to say, Barris, that today's show will be electrifying. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Well, before we start shocking our listeners, what did you have for breakfast?
What I had for breakfast today was actually cooked up some chicken.
Nice.
And I had a whole chicken, so I kind of just pulled it apart and had some pulled chicken and had a little bit of mixed veggies left over from last night. Had some grass-fed cheese that was just put on top of it. I basically just steamed the veggies and I put them in the oven. Not too hot because I put some olive oil, so it wasn't burning it, but I kind of like the flavor when I bake with it. And then some sea salt and cheese, just a little bit as I pulled it out. And broccoli, cauliflower, and what was it, carrots? Yeah, that stuff usually tastes good with like salt and cheese.
Awesome. Nice. Yeah, this morning I did a little intermittent fasting and some coffee and butter and some MCT. And I just finished up here before the show with some kielbasa and some Dijon mustard and some sauerkraut. And man, I don't know, just kielbasa and sauerkraut, they go together like peas and carrots, man. So good.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes we assume like, oh, these fermented foods and all this stuff is like so foreign to us, and they're gross and blah blah blah. But there's a lot of really good tasting fermented foods.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But sauerkraut's definitely a good one. If you mix it with kielbasa, I highly recommend it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the easiest ways to get it in is if you get like the Applegate or some other like grass fed like 100% beef hot dog or 100% chicken, as long as it's like one meat and not mixed with all this other stuff, and just like slice it down the middle and basically put all your toppings right inside of the hot dog and use that as the bun. Like, yeah, that tastes good. Like you can just use sauerkraut if you wanted to and just put that down the middle and it tastes amazing.
Awesome. Very cool. And also cool thing about PQQ
Mm-hmm.
that I'm just kind of discovering and reading, it also helps with mitochondrial. Your mitochondria is kind of like the powerhouse of your cell, right?
Yeah.
It produces ATP, which is like cellular, it's like the currency of energy in your body. But it also helps spontaneously regenerate new mitochondria, which is pretty cool. And also it's neuroprotective, which is one of these really interesting things out there. All these drugs and all these pesticides and chemicals, they tend to be neurotoxic, and it's cool if you can use various nutrients to help, one, protect you, but two, regrow mitochondria. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And like you mentioned, how it stimulates new growth in the mitochondria. It's really a really good one, and I often see it combined with the CoQ10 really often. So yeah, it's there's a couple. There's been it's kind of a new one that people are starting to see, but there's been a lot of trials done, and it's usually paired, like I mentioned, with CoQ10 because they're both involved with the mitochondria.
Yes.
The mitochondrial energy production portion of the body. So
absolutely, I'm going to be trying it because I want to push my brain to the max.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good. So in today's podcast, we're going to be talking about infections. So for people out there, we're not just talking about like getting a scab and that getting infected. A bit more complicated than that. And a lot of people don't realize if they have an infection, they might not be noticing the signs or the symptoms. Sometimes there aren't symptoms. But oftentimes I hear so often that like, oh, parasites, like, no, that only happens when you're in like a foreign country or something like that. So
Right.
So often people think like it's so taboo and impossible to happen. But all the time when people think that their dog's sick, the first thing they turn to is like, oh, does your dog have worms? But it's like, I didn't take him to a foreign country. So first off, why is there a stigma that for some reason in the U.S. we're immune to these parasites, or we don't have them? Why is there that stigma?
Well, first off, really great analogy with the dog, because that is true. Like a lot of people, when their pets get sick, they're like, yeah, does it have worms? Like that's one of the first things that's always thought of. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In the vet community, we're able to make that connection, but in the human side of things, we're kind of a little bit disconnected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the big disconnect is with the third world country, they're more malnourished, poor water. So there's like more immune compromisability, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely compromised immune system, less energy. We have that big kwashiorkors thing, which is like malnutrition when we see the distended baby's belly. And it's not that they're distended because they're overweight or they're obese. It's because of their being malnourished, and basically fluid is going outside of their cell and causing serious distension. So that's one of the biggest signs of malnourishment, is that big distended belly. So come the malnutrition and come the lack of good quality water and hydration and the stress of not having a shelter over your head, that's going to really mess up your immune system. And when we have that, again, we're going to fall prey to infections. And when we don't have good sanitation, because a lot of these infections are fecal oral, meaning they come from stool. They come from your bowel movement, if you will. And when there's poo in the streets and we don't have good plumbing, the chance of parasites is going to be super, super high. So I think The disconnect is, oh, we're healthier here, we have better immune system here, and we have indoor plumbing and better sanitation and cleaner water.
What are some of the reasons why, or what or should I say, what causes like an infection?
Well, typically, we have an immune barrier that lines all of our mucous membranes. It's called secretory IgA. So there's a couple different membrane barriers. We have IgA, which is more of a mucus barrier. We have IgM, IgG, IgE. So IgE is going to be there more with like allergies. IgM is like more for like acute infections, and IgG is like kind of more of like the vaccine kind of based immunity, like the cells that you're going to make, the longer term memory cells for your immune system. Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at like parasites and immune function, IgA is a big one. And with chronic stress, right? And stress comes in three major forms: physical, chemical, and emotional. When those are out of balance, right? Too much, too little exercise, trauma, old injuries for the physical side. The emotional side, family, friends, finances, religion, spouse, and all that from the emotional side. And then also the most important, I think, because it's the most insidious, is the chemical stress. Because let's say you have a whole bunch of symptoms and it's coming from an infection and you don't know it's an infection, well, that's going to be stressing you out just not knowing. So a lot of the chemical stressors like blood sugar and infections and adrenal fatigue and nutrient deficiencies and poor digestion, you may not know it's that unless you're really seeing a good functional medicine doctor to get really assessed.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Makes a lot of sense. And when we look at these stressors,
yeah,
and that's what's basically bringing down our immune system and making us susceptible. Is it just that, or is there maybe we ate spoiled food or other I know there's that portion of our immune system getting weakened.
Yeah.
But what are the other factors that are going to be introduced to actually be the cause? So that's going to be like going to be the guard, and our security isn't on guard, right. Basically, right? They're tired. We stress them out. We have them working 24-hour shifts, and all of a sudden they fall asleep. Now they're off guard.
Yes.
Now who are these parasites, these things? How do they get introduced into our bodies?
So we have basically the whole IgA mechanism that I talked about. That's like our mucosal barrier. That's like in Star Trek when the force fields are down, right? That's where the Klingons come and attack, if you will. Yeah. And again, with chronic stress, our IgA or our force fields are going to be down, and we're going to be more likely open to attack. So we have the chronic stressors that allow us to be open for attack. Mm-hmm. And if we go and we get exposed to some bad food or some bad water, or someone's preparing food in a way that, their hands aren't washed, or in a foreign country where we're getting exposed, maybe even a certain bacteria in food that we're not used to, that can be enough to trigger it. So we have like the chronic side of things where we're chronically getting beaten down. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of stress in our life. It's compromising that barrier system, that IgA. It's lowering our force fields, and then we're open to attack. That's kind of like the first step. And then we have the second step is we just get exposed to a whole bunch of parasitic antigen. So antigen is like the piece of the parasite. So obviously it's dose dependent. The more of an infection we get exposed to, the more our barrier and our body and our immune system has to deal with it. So small amounts, if we're in good shape, we may be able to handle it. Larger amounts may be a lot harder.
Yeah.
So when I was in Mexico earlier this year, I got a parasite infection. And it was really bad. I didn't even have time to test it because everything that was coming out of me, let's just say it was liquid, and it was not good. So I didn't have time to do a test. Not to mention doing a test without solid stool is very difficult to do. So I just treated myself with a good general antimicrobial parasitic program. And then within 6 hours, my stool went from pure liquid to solid, like flipping a switch. It was like, whoa, like herbs are very powerful. And if you're using them in the right dose, they can really knock out infections. And I guess we'll come back to this at the end of how to treat these things. But yeah, I mean, because I never had experienced the parasite infection from that acute perspective myself. So that was like an acute infection, and I treated it right away, and it was amazing, the results. But I see so many patients in my practice that, one, they never put two and two together, and they're walking around with chronic symptoms that may not even be gut-related. They may have poor digestion and IBS and Crohn's and reflux and bloating and gas, but a lot of them, may have other things too, like joint pain and fatigue and thyroid issues and depression, and they never ever make the connection because we live in a symptom-based model where symptom drug. The problem is you always want to trace symptoms back to the systems that are broken. And if we have infections and that's affecting our GI system, well, if our GI system's out of balance, a whole host of symptoms can occur from that. So we only look at symptoms as a means to trace them back to the systems that are out of whack. And again, it's not this linear A equals B symptom. Oh, if it's bloating or gas, it has to be GI. It could be fatigue. It could be depression. It could be so many other symptoms that we call are extra-intestinal. They are outside of the intestinal tract, and we may never make that connection.
Yeah, we don't have to wait until we develop an ulcer.
Exactly.
Right. So what are some of the common infections that you see in your practice?
One of the most common infections is H. pylori. H. pylori is a big one, and that's one of the infections that Dr. Marshall, I think he was either New Zealand or Australia, but he won the Nobel Prize for Medicine about 20 years ago, or maybe it was even more recent than that. But anyway, he was trying to conduct studies, and he couldn't get the funding for the study, so he gave the infection to himself, and he had himself scoped, and he basically developed the connection that H. pylori causes ulcerations in the stomach. So that was really important, and also connecting the fact of increased stomach cancer risk and H. pylori. So that was prolific that he was able to make that connection, and he won the Nobel Prize for Medicine that particular year for that innovation. So that was cool. Now, I see H. pylori in a lot of my patients, and H. pylori is like the common one that causes ulceration. So we think high amounts of acid, right? It's causing high acid, but H. pylori is one of those critters that actually causes low stomach acid. And because of the low stomach acid, food sits inside of you and putrefies and acidifies and ferments and basically rots. And organic acids from the rotting rise up and burn the esophagus. So because of that, we're having malnutrition, we're not absorbing food, and we have low stomach acid, so we're not able to sterilize our intestinal tract, or at least the stomach. So then we're open up to so many more infections. And I can't tell you, this study is showing that when you have an H. pylori infection, that messes up stomach acid. A constellation of symptoms from one study can occur. It's quoted that can occur from just that one infection. And because it affects digestion and nutrient absorption, and basically HCl is one of our other barriers that we're able to overcome things. It's kind of like sterilizing. So when our HCl is down, it's another barrier that our body has that can, if it's down, open us up to even more infections.
Yeah. And it's funny too, back to the commonality of something of H. pylori. We mentioned that there's this belief that we're not going to get infections such as this. They're not common.
Right.
But according to, and this isn't like this is a reputable source and not just some hippie blog that I'm going from, but according to the CDC, right? This is, cdc.gov. Approximately 2/3 of the world's population is infected with H. pylori. Now, that's a lot of people.
Exactly. And the question is, who's symptomatic? And you may have that parasite and your immune system's able to overcome it. And once that stress accumulates, you may start having symptoms. But again, it can go both ways. It could be the immune system's compromised and now you get it. It could be you have it, but it's not a big deal because your immune system's kind of keeping it in line, and then you get stressed, and then the symptoms occur. So it kind of happens both ways, and I agree. It's definitely a problem.
Yeah. Another thing that you'll notice, I notice people, they'll have stomach problems or maybe some reflux problems, and they often are on medications for a long time, or they're on a proton pump inhibitor, or these H2 blockers or something that they're taking, and maybe they have some temporary relief, but that's not going to be taking away the infection, right? Like what are we supposed to be doing about this?
So when we have chronic infections like this, proton pump inhibitors like Nexium, Omeprazole, Prilosec, they're just treating the symptoms. Because when we have an infection, the first thing that happens is infections can throw our body into a fight or flight state. So that's when our sympathetic nervous system's activated. What tends to happen is blood goes to the extremities, arms and legs, to fight and flee, right?
Mm-hmm.
It does that so it can mobilize glucose, right? Cortisol and adrenaline, it helps mobilize glucose so we have the fuel so we can fight and flee. Now, the problem with this is if we're constantly stimulating the fight or flight nervous system, digestion is a parasympathetic response, meaning the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system fires, and that drives blood into the center of the body. Why? Because we need that good blood flow, and we need that parasympathetic response so we can produce enzymes and digestive secretions and HCl. So if we're constantly in this fight or flight state, and let's say that fight or flight state is because of an infection, well, we're going to be just set up to not stimulate the enzymes, not produce the acids. And then all of that is the dominoes for healthy digestion. So healthy digestion works like this. Parasympathetic nervous system responds. We stimulate hydrochloric acid. Well, we have to be well hydrated and have enough zinc and healthy nutrients in our body. Zinc's really important, as well as enough chloride, because chloride's another part of the HCl molecule. That parasympathetic response allows us to produce HCl. HCl activates pepsinogen to pepsin, which is our active proteolytic or protein digestion enzymes. So in the stomach, we're primarily digesting protein. Protein gets digested and it lowers the pH. So the ground up pre-digested food in our stomach is known as chyme. And we want that to be nice and low because when that chyme gets released from the stomach into the small intestine, that acidity triggers our pancreas to produce lipase and trypsin and chymotrypsin. These are enzymes that break down fat and protein. And it also triggers our gallbladder to produce bile salts, which helps break down fat, and it also helps with hormone metabolism. So you can see how a parasite infection can cause estrogen dominance and hormone issues and can lead to malabsorption stuff. So I'll let you kind of break that down just to make sure everyone's got their head around that.
Yeah. So basically, we want to make sure that we are supporting our body entirely, just because, like I don't know, you probably mentioned this to your clients. I don't know if we really mentioned this on the show, but it's actually hard to see where H. pylori actually comes from, and we know that it's either fecal oral or maybe even oral routes where it's transported. So the main thing is to make sure that we are supporting our body, its defense mechanisms, making sure we have our bodies to be hydrated, having enough hydrochloric acid, so that way all of our defense mechanisms are always kind of peaked out, so that way in case we do come across something like this, our body can knock it out, so that way we don't have to be on drugs all the time.
Exactly. And a lot of people, especially in the biohacking community, are looking for optimum performance. And this is the infection connection is so strong. I just pulled up one study here, and this is looking at children in various foreign countries. And what they were looking at is helminths. So helminths are worms, like tapeworms or roundworms. And what they found was that people that had these parasitic infections combined with nutritional deficiencies had severe or had a strong association with cognitive impairments independent of their education. So again, memory tasks were given, and they found poor performance associated with parasite status, but no association was observed with education attainment or memory function. So the study also examined various ways of assessing parasite load and kind of index those. Mm-hmm. But again, basically, the results provide evidence that the effects of parasitic infection and attention process. And again, we talked about stress of an infection. Where does it drive the blood? Outward towards the extremity. So what that does is activates the sympathetics. If the sympathetics are activated, the parasympathetics can't be activated because we're on a seesaw. Parasympathetics are needed for digestion. If we're not digesting, we're going to have nutritional impairments. So having a chronic parasitic infection and having nutritional issues, I'm going to submit that they are cut from the same cloth.
Yeah. What are some of the other infections that you also see that are common?
So H. pylori is a big one, and let me just touch upon that real quick. There's about 5 or 6 ways to test for it. Yeah, so you have to test all 5 or 6 ways. I think at the end, bring that question out to me at the end, and we'll break down the various testing methods, okay?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I'm also going to send you over that study too. We'll put that in the show notes. I think that'll be good for the listeners. Mm-hmm. So regarding other parasites, again, other gut parasites such as Blastocystis hominis is a big one. Giardia, Cryptosporidium, various amoeba infections like Dientamoeba fragilis, Entamoeba coli. One of the biggest ones, one of the biggest killers in the world is actually Entamoeba histolytica. I mean, you break it down, it stands for histo means cell, lytic means cut, so it's cell cutting. That's pretty scary, especially when it can travel up into your gallbladder or go out of your intestinal tract into your brain. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So those are intestinal parasites right there, for instance, but they can go outside. You can also add worms to that list: Enterobius formicularis, roundworm, pinworms, tapeworms. Again, those can all cause problems. Again, eat your nutrition, cause stress, but they also produce biotoxins, which are like the chemicals that these little critters that they spit out, whether it's from defecation, they can poison your body. So bacteria produces endotoxins. So endotoxins, bacteria, mycotoxins from fungus. SIBO can produce lithocholic acid, which is toxic and can unconjugate bile, meaning it can unwind lots of metabolized hormones, which can throw off your hormones. So again, parasite infections can cause PMS and hormone imbalance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm seeing that a lot of these infections, they they often have like a really like easy way to be spread, and it's like kind of the best thing to do is just like wash your hands, make sure you're washing your food. But if you're in a lake and you accidentally swallow some water, or if the person who used the public bathroom before you didn't wash their hands when they walked out and grabbed the doorknob and you did and didn't notice, a lot of these things can be passing infections in a real subtle way. So like we mentioned, there's kind of this idea that like, oh, I don't have crypto, I don't have, H. pylori or Giardia, unless it's like we have diarrhea for like 5 days in a row, then it's like, oh wait, something's wrong.
Right.
But like you mentioned, oftentimes they can kind of be hidden and have these small chronic basically stressing our bodies out in such a small way that it's taking away from our adrenals, and we're using a lot of energy to produce all of these fight or flight responses without noticing it too much on a day-to-day basis, where it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse. So like you mentioned before, what are ways that we can test for some of these different infections?
So we can always test via the stool. Stool is a good way because we can actually see the antigen. We can see a piece of the infection. Now, not all stool testing is created equal. There's like 3 different companies that I primarily rely on for accurate stool testing. One being BioHealth Diagnostics. They're a good one. They run a 401H panel. Genova, formerly Metametrics, you can run a 2200 or 2205. They just updated the panel as of September 3rd, 2014. So I just maybe ran about 15 of these new tests. So I'll be getting some results back soon, but it seems to be more sensitive because they're looking at stool antigen as well as PCR, which is polymerase chain reaction, where they're looking at pieces of DNA as well, so a little more sensitive. Doctors Data has a really nice 3-day panel. And then Diagnostics has a nice salivary IgA antibody panel looking at worms and amoeba. So I have a couple of tools in my tool bag to assess these infections. And then also looking at blood can be very helpful, especially for H. pylori. I've diagnosed so many patients with H. pylori issues that don't show up in the stool. So I find that doing a blood test for H. pylori is a must if we have someone with chronic gut issues, just to make sure we rule it out. Those can be good things off the bat. And also, one level deeper would be Lyme disease. And Lyme's, we're looking at Borrelia burgdorferi, and there's a couple different ways we can look at that. We can look at our standard Western blot testing, where we're looking at the various bands, IgG and IgM. Now, when we look at Lyme's, we're looking for 5 IgG or 2 IgM for diagnosis, or we can have a more sensitive criteria where we're looking at 3 IgG and 1 IgM. That's a big mouthful. But again, Lyme's is really controversial because there are other labs like IGeneX or medical diagnostic laboratories that will look at other bands not tested on a conventional Western blot. And that's ways that we can find other infections. And when we have Lyme, for the most part, we also have other co-infections, potentially like Rickettsia, Ehrlichia, Babesia, Bartonella, various protozoa attached to the Lymes as well. So again, there's a lot of things we can look at, but blood and stool are going to be usually your go-to. And then again, we also have breath testing for H. pylori and or for SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And I didn't really even mention Candida as well. Candida is good. Sometimes Candida is really hard to pick up on stool testing. Again, some companies do it, but when we look at Candida, it's very rare that Candida is causing a major problem just by itself. It tends to be Candida and something else. Candida and a parasite and the H. pylori and SIBO. And when we look at Candida, it's really important looking at a person's history, because stool testing or antibody testing may not be enough. We may have to look at fingernails. What's your history of yeast infections? What's your history of dandruff like? Any yellowed or toenails or fingernails? Any rashes at all? So things like that, doing a really good history can also help detect things. And if we're seeing malnutrition, well, I'm going to automatically think parasites, because that can affect absorption. So I'll let you break that down for a second, Barris.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I noticed that you just mentioned right there, which I think is so funny because it's one of those, it's common, but that doesn't mean it's normal kind of things, is the the yellow toenails or any kind of fungus that we're seeing happening, and we often don't look at that much deeper. But yeah, definitely something that's important that you mentioned is making sure that you get a lab panel done, and for H. pylori especially a blood panel, because it can do a definitely better job of ruling it out. But sometimes you might have to do 2 different lab tests, because guess what, your poop is going to be different from day to day.
I want to just add one thing here, just so while we're right on the lab stuff. If anyone's having a hard time getting a hold of good lab testing, feel free to go to justinhealth.com/shop. Click on the side where it says lab testing, and all my stool tests are up there. So if you need access to good stool testing, feel free, and you can get access right up there as well. And again, you can also reach out to me, and I can definitely order some blood work and or stool testing for you.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing, I think we briefly mentioned it, but going about this, knowing that these are more common than maybe people priorly thought. What are just before we get into some of the ways that we can treat these things? What are just some, I guess, key things to look out for? Because it seems like there might even be kind of a general protocol to because you do want to test. Just like we had an interview with Steve Wright, and he talked about every year he spends $2,000-$4,000 on testing to make sure. That, because that's part of his investment is his health, being well-performing human being.
Exactly.
So we should be doing that too. I know some people might not have that money, but they might want to do like every year at least some type of cleanse or protocol or some kind of general thing to make sure that, hey, if there's it might not be a very strong infection, but maybe I have an infection that's messing with me that I can wipe out. So what are some common symptoms that we might be detecting, like just whether that be weight gain or chronic fatigue? What are some of these symptoms that we might not be noticing but are common?
All right, here's some good ones. You grind your teeth at night when you sleep. You wake up, that tight jaw, you have that grinding of your teeth. I know that was a symptom that my fiance would always complain about. You're grinding your teeth. I'm like, oh, I got a parasite. It's not my fault. And again, why does that happen? So let's go one step deeper. Parasites are active at night.
Yep.
So again, they're creating stress, and they're having fun, and they're doing their thing, having sex, partying inside your body. Kind of sounds gross, but it's what's happening. The joke in graduate school is, where do parasites party? I'm going to ask you that. Do you know?
Where do parasites party?
Yeah.
Your gut, your intestines?
No, they party at Club Ciela. I know, it's terrible. It's really Klebsiella. It's a parasite infection. It's a bacteria. Again, that's nerdy humor for you. But again, grinding your teeth is a big one.
That's a good
And
one.
the reason why is that the inflammation that's happening at night that's putting your body into a sympathetic nervous system state, right? Think about it. When you're really tense, what do you? You know, you may even like close your mouth shut. If you're really cold, you may even start shivering, right? So that can happen there. Achy joints,
Mhm.
skin issue. Obviously, this like inexplicable reason why you're so tired. Like I'm sleeping so much, I'm supporting myself, I'm tired. Why? I'm not feeling satisfied or satiated after your meals. Again, if you're at the table and another person's sitting right next to you stealing off your plate, well, it's pretty obvious why you're still hungry. But if someone inside of you is doing it, you may not be aware of it. So feeling like really not satisfied after the meals. Being diagnosed with an anemia, like this could be B12, like B vitamin based, like B6, B12, B9. These are called megaloblastic anemias, and also a microcytic anemia like iron, being low iron. Let's
Mhm.
see, trouble falling asleep, waking up in the middle of the night, having a history like of food poisoning, like an acute history, like going to Mexico and coming back, right? Um, Traveling internationally, that's a big one. And also unexplained constipation, diarrhea, and or symptoms of IBS. That's a good little
Mhm.
short list of kind of if you're having any of these issues, you could definitely be motivated to run some stool testing. And again, it's like the analogy I give is imagine pulling out of your garage or a parking spot. Ever drive away like with the e-brake on a little bit? You ever feel that feeling? You're like,
Mhm.
I'm just not quite moving like I do. Like I'm not getting momentum like I do. And then you look down, and you're like, oh, my e-brake's on. You let go, and you're like, whoa, all right, this is cool. And that same analogy I've given hundreds of times to patients. That's kind of how we are with our health. We could be paleo, AIP, doing good with sleep and stress and meditating and exercising. And then it's like we have this infection, and it's like we're walking around with the e-brake on. We get rid of the infection. It's like, whoa, okay, get an extra skipping my step. And again, like the study I showed you with cognitive performance, it's like, whoa, I can like focus a little better. I have,
Mhm.
better attention, better memory. So that's pretty cool benefits from just
Yeah.
getting rid of these lingering infections. Again, the infection connection is quite prolific.
Yeah, definitely. So next would be what are some of the protocols that we can use? I know there's some conventional treatments as well. If you got a test and you went to your normal Western practitioner, you'll probably get given some type of antibiotic. Then there's also natural treatments.
Yeah. So one on a scale of 0 to 10, like zero, like you're in the grave. So like let's start with one. One, you're like bedridden, no energy. 10, you just feel amazing. So if you're under a 6 or 7, I recommend strongly that you work with a health practitioner. I think everyone should, but under a 6 or 7, I recommend be working with someone because treating an infection without having foundation in your hormones and your diet, you're more than likely going to get reinfected. I find getting rid of the infection sometimes can actually cause
Hmm.
more symptoms than the infection
Yeah.
was causing before it was even addressed. So we want to make sure if there's adrenal fatigue, if there's digestive malabsorption, if there's diet and lifestyle issues that are going on, if there's overexercise, if there's hypothyroidism and stuff, we want to make sure a lot of those hormonal issues are addressed so there's a foundation for the hormones for the body to lean against. And again, the hormones help control stress. Again, the sympathetic nervous system response, like I talked about, that's mediated by our adrenal glands. And our adrenals and thyroid are intimately connected. So if we have adrenal and thyroid problems, we're going to have a hard time maintaining healthy nervous system functions. We want to do that before we really get to the infection. Now, again, there's some herbs you can try. Again,
Hmm.
my main foundational herb that I'm starting with whenever I deal with an infection is Artemisia. And Artemisia is a really awesome herb. It's otherwise known as wormwood, sweet wormwood, anua. But it's a really
Hmm.
powerful herb. It's been used for tens of thousands of years. Now, I use very high doses of this herb, upwards of 3 grams. I don't recommend someone doing this without being under care of a doctor because again, you can have elevated liver enzymes, ALT, AST. So you want to be monitored and you want to make sure the right protocol is being followed by stabilizing the adrenals, diet, lifestyle, nutritional deficiencies, all of those things leading up to that before you do it because it can cause more problems than you may know what to do with.
Yeah, definitely. I was trying to look at the exact product name.
There's a few different ones out there. I mean, using higher end companies are going to be the way to go, like Thorne or allergy research groups, and really using the right amount is very important. And then also combining it. Like, for instance, wormwood is more powerful when used with licorice. Now, not a lot of people know that. So if you have someone on an adrenal program and they're really fried, using the right licorice while they're on an adrenal program, while they're being supported with the wormwood, can also be very helpful. But again, if you have higher blood pressure, licorice may be contraindicated. So there's a lot more variables going on. And if you're chronically ill, monitoring liver enzymes via blood work may be a good thing. So again, we have like wormwood, we have various berberines such as berberine HCl, Oregon grape, golden seal. We have black walnut, we have burdock root. Again, we have oil of oregano, we have colloidal silver. And again, depending on the infection, I tend to vary the herbs according to the infection. Like, for instance, I got a Bartonella infection last month. So Bartonella henselae, it's commonly caused by cat scratch fever. You can also get it from ticks too. With Bartonella, my hand swelled up really big. And I used a combination of neem, morinda or noni, and silver, along with some cordyceps, and it worked phenomenal. It worked awesome. And in 3 days, my infection was gone. And my hand was swollen. I got to do a video on this because people just won't believe it. I had literally purchased antibiotics, and I had them like on my office desk. I'm like looking at them. I'm like, all right. I'm like, I trust this natural medicine thing. I've been doing it for 10 years. I believe the herbs work, and I've seen it hundreds of times. This stuff's legit. But I still had it because, when you start seeing things get really bad, you want a backup plan. You want an escape route. And I had them there. I never had to use them. Never had to use them. So again, the herbs are specific. Enough of the herbs really important. Most people don't use the herbs long enough, and it's really hard. I'm not going to give out protocols here because it really needs to be on an individual basis. It needs to be work with, again, a functional medicine practitioner, so it's specific to you because side effects can be nasty. And also using things like ginger or chamomile or peppermint, these things can be very helpful for lymphatic drainage from the infection, because we're just pulling all these dead soldiers, if you speak, if you will, like dead soldiers, meaning the dead parasites. They're in the battlefield being your gut, and your lymphatic system and your immune system and your detoxification system. They're like medics trying to pull these soldiers off the field in our gut, and we have to process these parasites.
Definitely. I noticed one thing that sometimes when people try to do themselves, they're not introducing a biofilm disturber or biofilm buster, and that sometimes can be the key, because a lot of times these microorganisms, these infections are encapsulated in exoproteins.
Yes,
and they're basically protected, and sometimes you need something like a biofilm disturber to break that down. So could you talk quickly about
yes,
I know myself, I've used Interphase Plus or whatnot, but tell me something about why that might be important.
Ever watch the movie 300 Hours? So all the Spartans, they're fighting, right? One of the big things they have that shield in front of them, and then they're able to kind of poke out their spear in between, but that shield is like a biofilm. And again, these critters use the biofilms as a way to decrease exposure to some of these antimicrobial medicines, herbal medicines. So again, things like ginger can be very helpful. Things like licorice can be helpful. Andrographis, eleuthero. These are natural biofilm busters. Interphase Plus is an enzyme product with various enzymes, and EDTA, which is a chelation agent. And I typically will use this during probiotic phase because it's not as antimicrobial, and I'll use that to break up biofilms in people that have more gut symptoms. So it's really specific. Sometimes just the adrenal support and some ginger, and that can be enough. Other people need a little more. So it's really on a case-by-case basis. But the more virulent your gut is, definitely getting some biofilm busters. A good simple one would be ginger off the bat.
Yeah, awesome. Sounds good. Well, with that being said, I want to make sure that people go to beyondwellnessradio.com. Especially make sure you click the link to go to justinhealth.com When it comes to these situations, like you said, if you're someone who feels fine, maybe you can do a general protocol. I know you have one on your site. That's just something simple that maybe, it's a new year and you want to just make sure you're cleaning everything up. But if you feel like you're having some of these symptoms, make sure you work with somebody like Dr. Justin and really, take the lab test so that way you can identify what you have so you can fix the problem. You can get a free 15-minute consultation to see if this is for you. So make sure you go to beyondwellnessradio.com and go to and redirect yourself to Justin Health and get that 15-minute consultation.
Yeah, that's a great point, Barris. And I also wanted to touch upon the good parts of parasites, or the so-called good parts. So there are parasites affect more of the Th1 branch of the immune system. So to keep it really simple, we have two major branches, the Th1, Th2. So the Th2 is going to be more of the antibody side. We're going to see that with like food allergens and autoimmune conditions because our body's producing antibodies that are potentially destroying our tissue. And then the Th1 is more like the natural killer side. So our Th1 is more active in parasite infections, Th2 with autoimmune conditions. So for instance, I'll pull up a study here. And the study is looking at the impact of parasite infections on MS. And what they found was parasite infections associated to MS indicate that parasite infections can actually regulate the host and can alter the course of immunity in MS, meaning they can actually they found that when the parasites were treated in MS, it actually caused more MS activity on a MRI. So there was more brain lesions. And some of this is actually the supposition or the underlying reasons why is because the infections are shifting the immune system. So in certain autistic kids, they're also finding that potentially giving them worms can be helpful because it's shifting the immune system. If they're Th dominant, and then you give this infection that's now driving the Th1 part of the immune system, well, there you go. Then you could balance things out a little bit. That's the reason why they find that so many people in third world countries are so prone to viral issues. They're so much more sensitive to viruses is because their Th1 immune system is so ramped up from infections that now they're actually weaker when it comes to viruses. So I think of that as more symptomatic approach. It's not really getting to the underlying cause of the stress, pulling the stress off the immune system. It's not getting to the underlying cause of nutrition and malabsorption and toxicity. So there can be room for that, I think. But at the same time, I think if you have an infection, you're probably better off getting rid of it and getting the nutrition and the digestion back on track, because we know these infections cause malabsorptions too. So that's not good for your immune system either. So it's which one is it? There's a study out there looking at H. pylori infections and Hashimoto's and autoimmune thyroid conditions. And they find that after age 2 or 3, these infections are going to be negative, meaning when we get rid of the infections, we actually see a reduction in thyroid antibodies, which is quite interesting. Again, off the bat, getting your kid exposed to dirt in the beginning can be really helpful for colonizing flora and getting your memory B cells out and getting your immune system robust. But then after age 3 or 4, then it's maybe getting exposed to all this crap isn't as good for the immune system. So it's this, there's some good stuff out there, some bad stuff out there. And again, it's hard to make, heads or tails of it, but that kind of gives you a good general idea of some of the pros of why these infections could be good and my kind of side of why I think they aren't the best.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I think if anyone's on the fence and they think they have a health issue and they've done a lot of things already, I think the next stone to overturn has to be the infection. So feel free to take action. Again, these infections don't go away unless you do something. You can reach out at my site, and I kind of already talked about how to get the lab work. And again, anything you want to add, Barris?
Yeah, put it like this: they're not just gonna walk out of your body. You're feeding them, you're giving them free food. They want to stay there and continue on. So make sure that you invest in yourself and find a way to figure out what's going on in your body, and do these tests if you have the ability to.
Exactly. And don't expect your classically trained medical doctor to be aware of these things. Again, it's the dogma is typical third world stuff, and I already kind of explained the background of that in the beginning. So just understand that to begin with, so you're not going there and trying to get some real info. But But again, Luis Gilliman's book, Look What Came to Dinner. Paul Chek's done a program on parasite infections. Again, if you study the work of Dr. Dan Kalish and Dr. William Timmons, he's got some great work on parasite infections, and studying from various doctors, I've been able to get my knowledge dialed in regarding how to get rid of these infections. So I hope that gives everyone some good information off the bat.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for listening again. And remember, go to beyondwellnessradio.com and hop on the newsletter. You'll be first to access all of these podcasts before anybody else does. So thank you guys again.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com/question. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.